A congressional map both parties can live with. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. I'm Mike Thompson. In the end, both parties gave a little. The Ohio Redistricting Commission has approved a bipartisan congressional district map. The map carves up Ohio into its 15 congressional districts. 3 are considered safe Democratic districts and 12 are considered to favor Republicans. The key changes: Democrat Emlia Sykes' district is slightly more safely Democratic in Akron. Democrat Marcy Kaptur's district in the Toledo area is more Republican. And Democrat Greg Landsman's district in the Cincinnati area goes from a toss-up district to leans Republican. Jesse Baumert, in the end, what prompted this bipartisan agreement?
Yeah, there were a few different factors. Democrats knew that if this moved to November, that they were going to have no say in what this map looked like, and likely it would have led to 13 Republican districts, 2 Democratic districts. And then on the other side, Republicans were, at least a little bit concerned about the possibility of this going to a ballot vote or a lawsuit, something that would be expensive, that would leave these districts up in the air for several months, with candidates not knowing where they were going to run. So both sides got something.
So were members of the commission happy when it was over? What happened after the meeting was over? Were they celebrating, shaking hands, high-fiving, or just like, okay, this is the best we can do?
State Representative Brian Stewart said that this was evidence that the process worked, that this is what voters wanted when they approved the 2018 ballot measure. Meanwhile, Democrats said that this is a broken process that would be better served by citizens being the ones to draw the maps, but they did what they felt like was the best of a bad option.
Half a loaf is better than none. Did Democrats get a half a loaf here or less?
I think they got half a loaf, but at the end of the day, I think this is the best compromise that they could be able to come up with. I mean, Ohioans deserve better at the end of the day, but I do give credit to the Democrats for being able to come up with some compromise. This gives them a fighting chance to be competitive in their districts, while also still being able to keep that 5 congressional seats. I think it might be a long shot, but at the same time, I do think it's much better than what was going to be proposed by the Republicans as well.
Mark, I think there were dreams from the ultra-conservative Trump supporters that it would get down to Ohio 2 Democratic districts. They're disappointed with this map, that the Republicans didn't go harder for it.
It would be such good government if we could get to that. I think 12 loaves are better than 10. Right now, the Republicans hold 10 seats. They're likely to hold 12. Depending on the kind of year that Donald Trump has between now and the election, if his popularity stays roughly where the same it is, he has a very high floor and a very low ceiling. If he remains popular, it could go to 13. These maps could show 13 Republican members of Congress going to Congress next session.
But the Democrats see this as Landsman's district in Cincinnati, the Democrat, also Marcy Kaptur in Toledo. They're incumbents. They're in Republican-leaning districts. They think they could, perhaps in a wave year, they could win, right, Jesse?
Yeah, Marcy Kaptur, after this map came out, said that she was going to run for re-election. That district is much more Republican than it has been. It has been leaning that way. She was able to win that district when it voted for Trump by nearly 7 percentage points. So she has some popularity in the district, but that is just going to be very hard for her to win. And then Greg Landsman right now has a couple of opponents. It'll be interesting whether this will draw another Republican or a more competitive Republican to run in that district.
If it's one thing we do know, too, about Congresswoman Kaptur, is that she's a fighter. She has definitely been up against odds similar to this. I do think it will be another challenge. But I think, at the end of the day, the Democrats are just asking for the rules to be played in the way that voters asked it to be played in 2018 when they made the vote to do this.
Mark, the 15th district, which is Mike Carey's district, stretches from Grandview Heights to Miami County in far western Ohio. Far western Ohio and Grandview Heights don't have a whole lot in common. Is this a sign that the system still is broken?
The system has always been maps drawn for odd reasons, almost always political. The notion somehow that's a recent thing or that's an Ohio thing is just not correct. Gerrymandering is named after Elbridge Gerry, who was it was a generation of the founding fathers. And so the notion of parties jostling to help themselves is part of the political process. The solution is, if you don't like the current members of Congress or the current members of the legislature, vote them out.
But it's hard to do when the districts are drawn to favor one party over the other. So I know everyone does it, and they've been doing it for 240 years. Does that make it right? I mean, should there be a better system?
Well, our system is such that both sides tussle, and then the side that wins gets to draw the lines. And the voters, in this case, not only do they get to pick members of Congress, they get to pick 99 reps and 33 senators, and those districts are a lot smaller. And so it's possible to defeat a Republican in a Democrat district and vice versa.
So, Stanley, what do Democrats need to do to fix this? Because that's Republicans got control in 2010, and that's where we are now for the most part. But Democrats could win seats before 2030 and move this the other way.
I think that's going to be the key. Democrats are going to have to show up. They're going to have to make the votes to be able to do the change. It's going to suck, but again, it could be much worse. And so I think, at this point, we have to make sure that we show up and play the game as much as they are playing the game too. And hopefully we see that. I think that there's definitely a chance for a wave, but I think it's going to take some time too.
Jesse, what's next? Is this over now? Is there any chance of lawsuits? There are a lot of folks at both hearings who are upset at both parties for this agreement.
I would say there's always a chance of lawsuits in any situation, but we did hear from Eric Holder, whose group has sued in the past, and he said that this is a gerrymander of a gerrymander, but was okay effectively with what came out of this. So that's at least one prominent group who might not be filing a lawsuit.
Once you have both parties on board and the Ohio Supreme Court looks different than it did last year, there was a couple of Subarus full of people in T-shirts at the hearings, complaining this is the hard left type with nothing else to do. There's no lawsuit to be had.
What is this it now? Stanley, is this issue over? These maps are in place now until 2031 when we do the census again, like as normal. Are we done?
I think that this is going to be it until we get closer to 2030. I don't think we'll see a lot of action on this front. I think that Democrats will take this as a win in some cases, but also we know that there's a lot of folks who are also upset about it. But at the same time, it could be much worse. And I think that Democrats will walk away saying that they won something rather than going into next month where, the General Assembly could just force a map down their throats and you wouldn't be able to answer that at that point.
All right, so no repeal, no constitutional amendment like we had last year on the ballot. That's not in the cards right now. There's no talk of that, right, Jesse?
I don't think so. I mean, the 2024 amendment just happened, and I think people are reassessing where they're going from there.
Well, and more importantly, no more Columbus on the record discussions of redistricting for some time to come.
We can only hope that it's settled for now. Whatever your opinion on this, maybe it's just settled. We can move on. Anyway, the federal government shutdown enters its second month this weekend. In October, government workers felt most of the impact with furloughs and indefinitely delayed paychecks. Now others will start to feel the effects. Some 1.5 million Ohioans stood to lose their SNAP benefits this weekend, but a judge has ordered the payments continue. Before the ruling, Ohio state officials had come up with a plan to give up to $25 million to families who would lose the food benefits. Democrats, the bigger issue is Democrats are holding out for approving a budget plan because they want Congress to extend subsidies for Obamacare. With open enrollment beginning this weekend, Obamacare enrollees find their premiums increasing sharply next year. Stanley Gates, Democrats could fix both problems, the SNAP benefits mainly, if they were to, in the Senate, were to say, okay, we're going to continue the government funding and move on. Why not do that?
I think that, there's a lot of things that could be said on both sides, right? There's a contingency fund that's available as well, where the government could be able to tap into that. There's been a refusal to do that. There's also a bill that the federal government could also do as well in the Senate that's been proposed by both Republicans and also Democratic lawmakers, and that hasn't happened. I think for me, as someone who grew up on the west side of Columbus, who has family that are in a very small, impoverished town in Mississippi, we're playing politics with people's lives. I think about it all the time. And, at the end of the day, SNAP isn't an acronym. It's people's dinner. And we can't continue to play politics with that.
Mark, a lot of folks who voted for Donald Trump use SNAP, use Medicaid, rely on the Obamacare exchange for their health insurance. They're all going to be affected by this. Do Republicans start to hear from them?
I think people know that the Republicans keep voting to keep the government open and the Democrats keep voting no. On the Obamacare side, I wonder how many of our listeners and viewers today realize that those short-term subsidies were covering the poor people who make $140,000 a year. That's what's expiring at the end of the year. The notion that there should be a health care insurance subsidy for people making up to $140,000 a year.
There's a sliding scale.
There
They
is,
weren't
but
getting
why
free
it would be
insurance.
that big to covering folks who could easily cover their own health care insurance is one of the reasons why it should not be renewed.
There was a lot of pressure, Jesse, on state officials to do something. Ohio has a pretty large, pretty full rainy day fund. We have this great unclaimed funds account we didn't know we had until a few months ago. So they felt some pressure to do something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was certainly the argument that Democrats made on the Ohio House and Senate floors this week, but Republicans said that the amount of money that we would have to spend to shore up, food stamps and SNAP benefits was going to threaten, the fiscal health of the state and so forth. So this is not a small amount of money or an easy fix, and that's why I think people are looking to the federal government to fix it.
Is this the tipping point, Stanley, where it's been a month? The last shutdown lasted about 35 days. We're getting close to that now. Yeah. Is this when members of Congress from both parties start hearing from their constituents, start really feeling the effects, and we get to a compromise?
I personally don't think so. I don't think we're there yet, which is unfortunate because, again, folks are playing politics with people's lives. I do think what we're going to see is a lot more conversations from folks come next year where we could see a wave on either side because of this particular issue. And it's going to go right back to folks not having paychecks, but still having to work. I have friends in D.C. that work for the federal government, and they have to show up every day without knowing if they're going to get a paycheck. And so, I don't think that this is going to go away. I see at least this happening for another 2 weeks. Unfortunately, I'm hoping that it won't be, but I hope there could be a compromise sooner than later.
Is there a compromise out there, Mark? I mean, you mentioned the income level of folks who qualify for the subsidies. What if Republicans would say, let's drop that down to $80,000 for a family of four, and we'll extend the subsidies for 2 years? Is that where the compromise lies?
That's usually what happens. In order for there to be a compromise, it's got to be in the nuance like that. We've got two very skilled legislative leaders, John Thune in the Senate and Mike Johnson in the House, and I think you will see some compromise like that. I do not think it goes another 2 weeks. I think by this time next week it's done.
I sure hope so.
Any other effects in state government? There was some state employees, state contractors who might be affected by this now, Jesse, with some late word?
Yeah, there was a notice that went out on Friday regarding about 9,000 state employees, related to funding that comes in from the federal government who could potentially be furloughed. I think those are notices that had to go out to unions and the employees, and so we'll see if that ultimately impacts those individuals. There's also places like Head Start, which provides childcare for low-income families, that are going to have to be closed in certain communities.
Mm-hmm. Now, back to the subsidies don't do anything to control healthcare costs. They help pay for the insurance, which is up front, but there's no real incentive for hospitals, to cut their costs, for prescription drug companies to lower their costs. Should that be a part of this equation? Can it be done as a part of this standoff?
I think that's the big question and why the debate continues. I mean, this stems all the way from the One Big Beautiful Bill all the way into this conversation about the shutdown. And so, I think that's why they're having this debate.
Mark? Government can't control costs. When it comes to health care, you can have cheap, universal, and high quality. Pick two. And whichever set of policymakers is in power picks two, and then everyone complains about the third. You cannot have cheap, universal, high quality anything. It's the nature of reality and economics.
But Europe has, maybe not cheap, but certainly less expensive than we have, and better health outcomes.
Socialized countries taking more money from taxes, which draws down innovation and brings business to places like America, which we like. What we don't want to do is follow that model and not have jobs being created here.
But those people don't have to pay for health insurance every month either, at least not as much.
That's the trade-off, is they pay less for, other people pay it for them. There's always a bill to pay. The question is who pays that bill, and it should be the people who get the benefit, or it should be the people who don't get the benefit.
All right. Over the past several years, Ohio property taxes have risen sharply thanks largely to rising property values. But not all property owners have seen their taxes increase. It's because they don't pay property taxes. Ohio law exempts most nonprofit organizations from paying property taxes. Things like hospitals, universities, churches, nature preserves. A new bill would require certain large nonprofit nature preserves to make payments in lieu of taxes. The bill raises the question, should large nonprofits like billion-dollar hospitals and universities pay property taxes to support local services and lower the tax burden on homeowners? Mark Weaver, should nonprofits, especially the big ones, should they be paying property taxes?
Certainly the ones that are getting money for what they're doing, whether it's someplace like the Columbus Zoo, which has a big issue right now about whether they should be paying for the EMS care that comes out of Liberty Township, or places that make money in the nonprofit world. They don't call it a profit, they call it a surplus. But let's also remember, if it's a true charity, meaning they get a tax break for donations, should be they taking that tax break and then paying property tax? It's essentially moving government payment from one hand to the other.
What do you think, Stanley? Like, look at the big hospitals in town. Nationwide Children's Hospital's net revenue in 23, according to the tax return, was $300 billion. Ohio State University Medical Center has a $1.5 billion reserve. I mean, but they don't pay property taxes. They've got a lot of money.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of the conversation continues to happen, particularly in Columbus, but definitely all across the state. Look, I worked at city government prior to my current job, and I work for the city of Columbus, which hands out a good amount of property tax abatements. And so I think when they're handled very well with the thought of making sure that we're bringing jobs to Columbus, and also making sure that we're investing in the community. I think that, the key is just trying to make sure that we're not looking at doing this and making inequity dressed in a business suit. How do we make sure that property taxes are going to be able to go back to school districts, social services? But I think, these big corporations, sure, maybe you should get like a rookie contract, right? Where it's a limited agreement on how you're going to be able to pay property taxes. But then from that point too, how do you make sure that you're bringing the jobs and then also making sure that you're still paying those taxes too?
This is is this a test case, a small little trial balloon for the legislature to dip their toe into this property taxes for nonprofits?
Yeah, I think nearly everything's on the table when it comes to property taxes at the Ohio legislature right now, and you're seeing a lot of innovative ideas. You're seeing a lot of, different ways of going about it. In general, you can either adjust the rate, so like how much people are paying, or you can adjust the base, how many different types of services and people are paying. So there's only so many levers you can pull on this.
Now this bill, Mark, deals with a large nature reserve in a certain county. I forget which county it is. And the county justifiably says, look, this land is huge. It's a lot of our county. We can't collect property taxes on it. Do they have a point?
Well, sure, they can't, but also we set aside land for nature preserves for a reason. And if it becomes less doable, we'll have less of it. So when government subsidizes something, we get more of it. When government taxes something, we get less of it. And we ought to be thinking about that when we make tax policy.
Plus, Stanley, the deer and the antelope, when they're playing in this preserve, they're not requiring a whole lot of services, right? I mean, what is the county providing? They're not schools and fire, no?
I mean, but that goes right back to the conversation on levies too, right? And I think that whether it is the antelopes that are playing in the preserves or not, this is also a way to have economic impact to these communities too. I think the Columbus Zoo, while they don't pay taxes, they have economic impact to this whole region. That's over millions of dollars too.
But what they're not doing is they're not paying for their EMS runs, which is coming out of Liberty Township. So we all love the Columbus Zoo, but they ought to pay their own way.
Well, we'll get into the fact that it's in Delaware County, but it's the Franklin County taxpayers that pay the taxes. We'll get into that at some other point. But what about state government? I mean, you talk about this circular sort of thing, but in Columbus, government has a lot of property. I mean, so Franklin County and the school districts in Franklin County, Columbus in particular, they lose out on that money.
That's the nature of a seat of government. You have more government things, and you're right, government would be paying itself. The property tax problem is a bigger one, and it's going to have to be addressed in a bigger way. I think Ohio is the 8th highest property tax burden in the country. As a result, there's a larger solution out there, and it's going to have to be policymakers who make it.
All right. Another idea to lower property taxes is to consolidate Ohio's many, many government entities. School districts usually top the target list. The state has just more than 600 school districts. Some, like Columbus, are large. It has 45,000 students. Some are small. Kelly's Island has 5 students. Put-in-Bay Local Schools has 71. Supporters of consolidation say fewer districts mean fewer highly paid superintendents and deputy superintendents. Opponents say More local districts gives residents better local control of their community's schools. Jesse Baumert, everything's on the table. You mentioned about property taxes. How much is this on the table, consolidating school districts?
Well, I know there is a bill from a senator that would voluntarily do some of this, but as far as like forcing school districts to consolidate, that starts to be a tricky subject for lawmakers who have to go back to these school districts and talk to them about who they're going to vote for next election and so forth. So it's a little challenging, but I think particularly some are concerned about the overhead, like you said, the infrastructure that each one of these more than 600 school districts has.
Other states run their school districts by county. Franklin County is one district, and they would run all the schools as one. And some of these states are pretty populated. I mean, they're like Maryland and Virginia, I think, do it this way.
Yeah, I think that's where it gets tricky though, right? Because, you know, if you have one Franklin County district for all the school districts that are here, I think parents and also even teachers there will be an uproar. And I think, you know, we can't be thinking that rural and urban communities face the same challenges as well. And so, you know, I don't think that fewer districts will fix any of the inequities that we talk about. I think we just need to figure out a way to be able to manage school funding better and figure out a better funding formula too for schools.
There's a political angle here that we can't ignore. School board members are natural competitors to state legislators. In fact, many of them go on to be state legislators. Superintendents are very important influencers in each of these towns. And it's asking lawmakers to get crossways with some of their most constituents is asking a lot of a political player.
Since a lot of these smaller districts, Mark, are in rural areas, wouldn't it make sense for them to combine? Wouldn't it mean more AP classes for those kids in these rural areas they may not have right now? Is there a trade-off there that you could make the case for?
Yeah, there's a lot that can be done. You mentioned AP classes. Maybe some of them can be offered by distance. You could also have your payroll done between several districts. You could have some of your contracting agreements done with vendors. There's ways to make consolidations without forcing districts to lose their uniqueness.
How about incentives, Jesse? Is that what it is? Is the carrot easier than the stick? Say, okay, your property taxes aren't cutting it in your rural district. Combined with your neighboring rural district, will increase state funding to cover that property tax deficit.
It's possible. I mean, school districts famously love being told what to do by Ohio lawmakers. So I would see that being a tough sell, regardless if there's a stick or a carrot. But, you know, if the right incentives are there, we could see what happens.
Who used the term uproar just a minute ago?
That was me.
Why, and that's not uncommon for school issues, why are school issues so hard? Is it the hardest issue to find a compromise on in government, school issues, or is there anything that compares?
I don't think anything compares. I mean, you're having conversations about books, you're having conversations about secession, right? And so there's just a constant thought process about how do we educate the next generation of students. It's an important and necessary conversation, but at the same time, it doesn't go away, and we need to figure out again how to actually figure out how to do the funding as well, too.
Mark, Columbus has tried to close schools. They can't because the parents protest. Dublin just recently was going to redistrict its high schools. Stopped because there was a lot of outrage in the community. Changing how schools operate is very difficult. Why is that?
Well, if you think about it, a student interaction with the teacher is the longest government actor interaction our families have on a basis. So we're constantly interacting with the government. Yes, we drive on the roads, that's not a person. Yes, we pay taxes, that's not a person. But we care about our schools because they're affecting our kids.
And even though, you know, you may only be a parent for maybe 30 years, 25 to 30 years, you have a kid in school.
Well, and then you're paying taxes about it, and then you're sore that they're spending so much money on that darn classroom stuff that you advocated for when your kids were in there. There's a bit of an irony there.
And then they ask for a levy every 3 or 4 years. Yep. Anyway, it's time now for our final off-the-record parting shots. And Mark, you're up first.
We all know Watergate was a one-time corrupt, terrible thing. It was on front pages across the country. This Arctic frost scandal, where we now know Joe Biden's minions did things much worse than Watergate. Very little coverage. Keep your eye on the Arctic frost investigation.
Okay. Stanley.
I just want to congratulate my cross-country team. I'm an assistant coach at Central Crossing High School in Grove City. They just finished their season last week. Our boys and girls team had the best average that they've had all season. It's the best that we've had in 10 years since I was almost there. And so I'm really happy for them. We have a banquet next week and just want to make sure I shout them out.
Good deal. Congratulations. And Jesse.
My colleague Laura Bischoff took a look at some of the finances and just struggles of Central State University in the Dayton area, and there was at least one place where they didn't have a fire alarm that was working. So it's going to be a rough situation. It's going to take some time to get sorted out.
All right, look for that in the Dispatch, right? Dispatch.com. The gestation period for Asian elephants is between 18 and 22 months. Stay with me here now. So I don't think the Columbus Zoo 2 years ago began an elaborate political strategy to pass its levy on the ballot. But earlier this month, as early voting began, the zoo welcomed a new baby elephant. Phoebe gave birth to a male calf. The public can see the calf starting Friday, 4 days before Election Day. It's likely a coincidence, but images of a cute baby elephant certainly won't hurt the zoo's levy campaign. Congratulations to Phoebe and the Columbus Zoo. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Continue the conversation on Facebook. You can also watch us anytime on your time at our website, wosu.org/COTR. We're also on the PBS video app, and we urge you to check out the brand new WOSU News channel on YouTube, and you can watch us there as well. For our crew and our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.